Hey guys, welcome to probably episode 13. Depends how you feel about that number, but I have Cheryl here today.
Hello.
She's my youth pastor. I mentioned her before. She gave me the That Sounds Fun book and didn't finish reading it, but I'm in the book right now. And this is her third slash fourth podcast, so
Woo.
exciting times. And she's an inspiration to millions, guys. Millions of people have been
I
inspired
don't know
by
about
her.
millions, but like at least tens.
At least tens. She's so humble. You're actually like a really famous person. You're like, oh, just tens of people.
Tens of people are inspired by me, maybe.
I guess we can start in line. Do you have anything you want to specifically look at?
We can go in order, and then if there's things I'm like, I need to think about that more, I can say pass or something.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay.
And you can edit that out and not make me sound like a dummy. So I have a question about this. And you're just like,
yeah, Cheryl knew exactly what to answer every single time, exactly on the second I was asked. She asked it.
I'm trying to look humble when I say pass. Just kidding. I don't know everything.
Okay, so the first one is she gave sermon for Good Friday at our church, and it was online, obviously, especially with like restrictions being back up again. So it is what it is. Do you want to say well, I thought that the parallel was very interesting. So gist of the parallel.
Yeah, the gist of the parallel was I called the sermon A Tale of Two Trees. And the first tree is a tree in the Garden of Eden, which in Genesis, God creates this beautiful garden and creates everything that's in it. And then he creates Adam and Eve and he puts them in this garden. And there's one tree that they're not allowed to eat of. And it's a tree that's going to give them the knowledge of good and evil. And I don't know how, like, I could re-preach my sermon, but I don't think I will.
Another 40 minutes.
The basic, the end. The basic idea is that when Adam and Eve disobeyed God because they ate that fruit, and most of us know that story in some form or another, they ended up realizing what they had done. They realized that they had done wrong. And so they hid behind a tree. And they thought that the tree was going to save them from God somehow. But like, God is so powerful. He already knew that they had disobeyed him. He knew that he knew where they were. He knew what they had done. He knew what was going to happen because he's outside of time. And so he basically, like, they hid behind this random tree thinking like, oh God, like God won't be able to judge us if he can't see us. And that's not true. And so fast forward through the whole Bible until Good Friday, which is the day that we celebrate Jesus dying on the cross. Not celebrate, we remember.
We're just like, Jesus
died. That's weird.
Christians are actually the Jewish people who are mad at him. Just like, yes, Jesus died.
Yeah, no, we're not. We don't celebrate it, except that it's something profound that he did for us. But that's another tree. It's a different tree that Jesus was hung on, and he's the one that took the judgment. So Adam and Eve thought the first tree could hide them from God and prevent their judgment. And Jesus hung on a tree to just like welcome God's judgment on our behalf so that we could know him and be free and not be judged by God. So there's a whole lot more to it, and you can probably find my sermon on YouTube or something, but yeah.
Westview Bible Church, YouTube, Good Friday.
Yep.
That's what it's called, basically.
It's like April 2nd was the date, yeah.
And I think, there was like the whole tree thing, but I don't know why I remember specifically like the two gardens, because before it happened, right? Jesus was in the garden of, how do I pronounce it? Gethsemane, G word. And Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, and how they both reacted to being in those two gardens. I thought that was really interesting. Like, you brought it up, but I don't know why that was like the biggest parallel I remember.
Yeah.
Even though you named it Tale of Two Trees, but I just remember how you said like, well, Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prayed to God about his doubts. Instead, Adam and Eve like went for their how do I say that, like towards what they were doubting instead of asking God about it first.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I was drawing the parallel between the two in the sense that like Adam and Eve were in this luscious garden where they had everything they could possibly need. There was nothing that they didn't need that wasn't in the garden available to them. And they probably had more than they needed. And yet when they got tempted that one time, they gave in, they chose to give in to that temptation. but then Jesus was in a second garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's praying right before he is about to go to the cross, and he knows he's going to the cross. And so he's praying to God, and he's like, God, if you can take this away from me, if you can make it so I don't have to do this, then like that would be great, but not my will, but yours be done. And so he kept praying that. I prayed that a couple times. And it was just like a really stark contrast between Jesus being like, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to because I trust in you, God. And then Adam and Eve being like, I want this and I don't trust you, God. And they just did their own thing.
They're like, oh, well, maybe they're right. You know, the person who created me, the person who gave me this whole place. Oh, I don't know if he was right about this whole thing.
Yeah.
I think he was wrong about that one tree, you know?
Yeah. So that's what that's another, I thought there was like a lot of cool parallels between the Garden of Eden and Jesus. And
well, obviously, Jesus is like the center of everything, yeah. So everything is a parallel to him.
Yeah, and the Bible calls Jesus the new Adam. So there's Adam and Eve in the beginning, and then there's Jesus is the new Adam, because what Adam did was usher in sin and a curse for us, and Jesus saved us from that curse, and he lived the perfect life that Adam couldn't. So
ooh, that's
yeah,
fun. Wait, hold on. I wanted to say something, but I forgot. It was like something else about the. Oh man. Oh, well, I'll probably remember at some point. It was something about Jesus, but like, you know, there's so many things about Jesus. So,
something about Jesus.
Something about Jesus. The next thing is, I just explained to Cheryl before we started, hierarchical religion in Christianity. Basically, we were watching a video in ethics class, because right now we're doing like the big religions, and we're basically watching other people's videos. Our ethics teacher, I understand that he doesn't have a lot of time, and I guess it's easier to like give you a video that you can rewatch. But it's not, he didn't make the video that we watched on Christianity. It was very well, for me it was very interesting, because I've always been a Christian, so it never has occurred to me that there's like a certain analysis that you can have from like an outside point of view. And I thought it was very interesting. But they put out a point that I wanted to like discuss what you thought of, because the person said, oh, well, Christianity has always been a religion that has been hierarchical, where not only, like, I guess in Catholic Church, there's like a literal hierarchy in where you are, but also how we see that humans are higher than animals in God's eyes. Because literally in the Bible it says God said that it was very good, right? What do you think?
I agree.
Well, I guess I never thought of it like that. I just knew that people were special.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we're special because we are the only created beings that are made in God's image, that the Bible says we're made in his image. The animals that were created in the garden, and still to this day, like a lot of people would agree that don't have souls. They work on instinct, not on like thought processes, where we have like a decision to make and we go back and forth and weigh the pros and cons and all of that stuff. But animals never do that. They do what they do, you know, like
the Buddhists come in like super angry.
Like the dog's going to go after the bone or after the meat, you know, like, and he's never going to be like, should I do this? You know, like even eating poo, even when they eat poo, they don't even think about it. They're just like, something to eat. So
I'm not sure if it fits my diet.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's proof that humans are more special, because humans can be dumb too. Hopefully we're not eating poop, but I just
surprised.
well, I'm hopeful. Don't eat poop, okay? That's my if you get nothing else from this. But actually, with regards to like, I heard I have a favorite preacher that explained it this way once. He's like, you know, he was talking more about like human nature and stuff. But he's like, you know, if someone were to, you know, we're all sitting in this room and someone pukes in the front row on the floor, to everyone else in the room, the speaker or whoever was in charge would never have to say, nobody eat this, right? Like you'd have to like barricade it away from everyone, because you were trying to stop people from eating someone else's puke. But for a dog, they do that, right? Like you would have to prevent a dog from eating someone else's puke. And I've cat sat before where, you know, there's two cats and one pukes and the other one eats it. And like, sorry to be so gross. I'll stop talking about puke now.
Trigger warning.
Puke. But all that to say, I got way off track. All that to say that we had God's breath breathed into us at creation, and for the other animals, God spoke them into existence. For us, He formed us out of dirt. He lovingly formed us into a being.
What is that called when there's it's not a tornado, but it's a very small like thing we're in an area because of the wind and the walls.
I want to say whirlpool, but that's water. A whirlwind.
Oh, maybe. It's like a whirlwind that he kind of made to make a person, right?
Well, it's more. I more picture it as like someone, like you give a lump of Play-Doh to a kid and you make a dinosaur or whatever. Like that's my go-to when I get Play-Doh in my hands because I'm always like, what am I gonna make?
Dinosaur.
So I just make a dinosaur. And I have nephews, so they love it. But yeah, I like God like literally formed us out of clay, out of mud, out of dirt, and so he was more intimately into that. Like when you just say something like "let there be a Hannah" versus like forming what Hannah looks like, and
specifically,
and then the most intimate act was when he leaned down and breathed into us. So that's the difference between the creation of humans and the creation of animals. And God has a different relationship with humans than He does with animals. And
like I said, the Hindus and the Buddhists come in like, oh, how dare you say that?
yeah, and I mean, yeah, that could be like a crazy long podcast just in and of itself. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't really a question. It was more that I guess I never saw it that way because we were always taught it. So I was like, I guess I knew that like Buddhists and Hindus and like different religions did believe that in some way that all creation is equal. But I guess I also, not that because I didn't think that all creation was equal in that way, but I was like, well, yes, we are all creation. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, right. Well, we were always taught that like humans are better, and God said that they were very good and all that stuff.
I will add to that. God also gave humans the job of caring for the rest of the garden. Adam actually had to name all the animals and trees and plants. So can you imagine just sitting there for like however long? And God's just praying, you're a cow, you're a dog, I said cow already. Okay. Like you're a yak or whatever. So yeah, like Adam had that distinct responsibility, and we still have that mandate to care for creation. And so I think like there are people who will say like, oh, well, we shouldn't eat animals then, and blah, blah, and I'm not going to get into that debate, but we have the responsibility as humans to care for the rest of creation. Mm-hmm. And so, make sure that we're caring for the environment, make sure that we're not being cruel to animals. And yeah, that's another thing that God separated humans.
Oh man!
By that,
this is going by really fast. I don't think we're going to really.
We'll do a couple episodes. Yeah. Part 2. Oh, we'll just make it a regular Q&A with Cheryl
every single week.
I'm down.
Oh yeah. So my next one was just basically a prompt that it was prosperity gospel in general, but also is there a difference between prosperity gospel churches? Well, I know that there is a difference, but like, what would you consider like just bad teaching versus the whole sector of prosperity gospel and like woo woo? I would call it
woo woo.
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
Okay, can you rephrase your question?
I know that there is a difference, but what would you consider the difference between like bad teaching in general and the whole world of like prosperity gospel and like God will do all of these things for you?
I'm still not clear on your. So you want to know the difference between bad teaching and prosperity gospel?
And like I guess this also ties into like it's not the same thing, but I mean there's a lot of also new age kind of tied in with prosperity gospel and like where that's what I mean by woo woo. They'll do some people have like Ouija boards, but also like they say that the Christians and also what's the difference between all of those woo woo things and just a person being just bad at teaching?
Okay. For me, I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer your question the way you want, but for me, it comes down to grace. So God is a God of infinite grace, and we see that in Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean that He doesn't have a purpose for things that are going on in our lives. So sickness, difficulties, in the prosperity gospel, beliefs, those would, like, if those exist in your life, it's because you've sinned or you don't have enough faith to get rid of them. And I actually read a book written by the nephew of a very prominent prosperity gospel / healer guy, where he, like, it was kind of one of those like tell all behind the scenes, because this guy came,
He left, right?
He left, and he talked about like people screaming as they were being yanked out of their wheelchairs because they were trying to make it look like they were healed, but they weren't, and they were just like, like, so it's abusive, because when you are saying something to someone like you're not healed because of this issue, or because you don't believe enough, or they put it on the person who's trying to be healed. And God chooses to heal some people, and he chooses not to heal other people, and both of those glorify God. It's not a no-brainer saying like, well, God will just show he will always heal you, and he will show his power in the way that he heals you. Like, he can also equally show his power and his glory in the way he doesn't heal you. He can draw you closer to him than ever before in not healing you. He can make you have like a crazy testimony to people in not healing you. Not that it's about like, I'm not healed, I'm just going to use you and not heal you. But like, yeah, I think like the Bible says that we don't know God's thoughts. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. And so when we think it's like, oh, duh, I should be healed, God's like, no, I have this like created this other purpose, and you haven't even begun to explain it. And the Bible says that God is able to do more than we could ever ask or imagine. And that's like crazy to me. Like, it's like, okay, well, I can imagine getting healed from whatever, like, I can't imagine what I'm not imagining,
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But God does. And so he's so much bigger than just like what we're experiencing, and he sees it all work together.
Well, because I remember I saw this thing from this channel I really like, because she used to be in the New Age, and she also spoke a lot with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, and so she has like a very interesting perspective, because she knows very deeply these well, I would consider them kind of cultish, but like she knows them very intricately, and she has so much sympathy and empathy for them, because like she knows almost how like they would think. Of course, she doesn't know every single person individually, but she had like a lot of friends who would come over, and she described. Wait, this is totally not related. I don't know why I like the link that I made did not make sense. It made sense in my head.
Pause.
And so basically, she was reviewing this video. Well, in a book. What am I saying? Wow, I can really grammar today.
This video in a book.
She was reviewing a book in a video she was making. And it was, I forgot his name, but he's the head pastor at Bethel, I think.
Okay.
And basically, in the book, he said something about how there needed to be a revival. This is not verbatim, obviously, but he basically insinuated that there needed to be a revival before Jesus came back. When it's kind of contradictory, because I'm pretty sure in Revelation, there says there was like a thing where there would be weakness in the church or something before Jesus came or something. Of course, I don't know the Bible like really that well, but she brought up that point, and apparently at their church he almost sponsored this event where he encouraged it, where there was this little girl that had died, and instead of like letting the family grieve or having a funeral or something, they were like praying for her to come back to life, which I thought was very problematic, because like the only people that have come back to life are Jesus and Lazarus that Jesus raised. So it's just like it's kind of I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I don't think that Jesus and Lazarus are the only people who've come back to life.
Really?
Even in the story of Good Friday, it says that Jesus, when Jesus died, the graves opened up and corpses were walking around, like dead people rose from the dead.
Oh.
And I believe there's stories. I mean, Jesus healed a boy who was dead. He healed a little girl who had died. Elijah, the prophet, healed someone, or raised someone from the dead. And I've heard stories of, in Africa, there's people who have raised from the dead as well. And I've been in a situation. I was at a church once, and someone had died of cancer, and they were praying for them to raise from the dead. And I don't know what happened because I was only there. I was visiting. But I think the distinction is that Jesus is the only person who died and then rose back to life and then didn't die again. Didn't die again.
Oh, yeah.
So Lazarus would have died again. All the people that I just mentioned who have raised from the dead would have died again. So I think it can still happen, but I think, again, the way that it was done at Bethel, and I'm not like super familiar with the story, but from what I heard, it was pretty bad. Like, it was pretty abusive in the sense of like, we're going to use this little girl as like our miracle.
And it wasn't chill,
and then it
though.
was like not even the parents who were doing it, but the church leaders. And then when it didn't happen, they blamed the parents, so it's, yeah.
And I don't like, I mean, obviously you brought up some points where like people have raised from the dead, but I still feel like it's very hurtful because the parents didn't really ask for it, and it was so publicized in a way that it almost seemed like a parade they were trying to throw. Like, oh, let's wait for the girl to like
when I was in my that situation where I was at a church and someone had just died, they were like, God, we're not going to take this. And first of all, I was like, I don't know that we would talk to God that way. Like, I don't know if that's a good idea. But also I was thinking in my head, like, what if she doesn't want to come back? Because the Bible tells us when you die, you're free from your pain. You are in paradise. And like, why would you want to come back to this earth where you can get sick again, where you have to go through death again? Like, why would you want to do that? And so, I remember just thinking like, this just feels off, And again, it's because the people who are on earth are the ones who are, struggling with the death, which is totally fine. I just lost an uncle last week, and, I don't even really know him that well, but, it still is a sad thing, and you grieve and you mourn, but that's okay.
And then blaming God, like, oh, we will not accept this.
Yeah, like, okay, like what? But so yeah, like, I don't know if I fully answered your question about any of that, but it's very harmful. And like I said, it comes back to grace. Like, God is just so gracious to us that like we all should be dead. Like the Bible says the penalty for sin is death, and we should all be dead. But it's by God's grace that he sent Jesus to live a sinless life and die for us. And then we know God now because of that. Sin separates us from God, and Jesus made a way for us to know God again. And so that's what I hold on to. And whatever I'm going through, I've been through tough times. I've been through really hard stuff. I know people who are going through really intensely hard things, but when they're in the moment and they're trusting God fully, like there's just like a moment of clarity where it's like, God, you're in this. And even if I don't get out of this situation, like I know someone who had cancer like 5 times. Oof. And, she kept like getting into remission and then getting cancer again. And her pastor was like, hey, like, how are you doing? And she's like, well, every time I get cancer, I just go back and I just tell everyone about Jesus that's there, like, and that's like, she almost accepted it as her mission in life, like, I'm with these people. I know what they're going through. I know what they need. And I'm experiencing God's realness and presence in my life. And I'm going to share that with other people. And she wouldn't have that opportunity if she wasn't suffering from cancer. And that's really hard to accept when we're on the outside of that situation. Mm-hmm. But God seems to work in our hearts in the situations. And one of the things I always try to think about or ask God when I'm in a tough situation is like, God, what does it look like to be faithful right now? Like, I'm going through this rough thing. How do I be faithful today? Not even like, how do I get out of it? What's the shortest way? But just like, today I'm in this thing and I know that I'm not.
Run.
Yeah, just like, pew. But like, I'm in this tough thing. Today, this is the reality that I live in. How do I be faithful to you in that? Mm-hmm. And that's usually a helpful way of looking at it instead of like, God, you're the worst, and why are you making me go through this?
I feel like kind of a jerk to like bring up a completely different topic. Now that like,
I'm like preaching my guts out, and you're like, also
changing subjects. Well, it's sort of related. Where my parents actually have conflicting opinions, which they don't really disagree that often. Well, on little things they definitely disagrey, but I think this topic is kind of a bigger topic that they disagree on.
So you're going to make me pick a side between
yeah, tell me who to listen to. I know that it's like a nuanced conversation, but I already kind of had an opinion, but it's not because I know that much. It's just like a feeling. So I'm like, am I just or validated in feeling that way? So basically, the preface would be like mega churches, right? What are they? There's a lot of sets of mega churches in the world. Just a little context for you guys. Mega churches are like huge churches with like many thousands, tens of thousands of people that go every single week. And usually a mega church will have like multiple churches in each country or continent or whatever you want to call it. So the big ones would be like we just mentioned Bethel, right? I would consider them a mega church. And there's like Hillsong. I think Elevation Church is also
Probably. Yeah.
Probably. I know they have a couple in California that are like huge.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, so those are examples of mega churches, and like I think I watched this guy called Honest Youth Pastor, and he has like an Instagram, but he also has a YouTube channel where he will dissect different preachers, and I think that it's really interesting, like what he brings up, and obviously he's not like just the best person ever to like teach, but he does bring a lot of valid points, and I think like although I don't always agree with him, a lot of the stuff that he brings up like makes sense, and so I like to watch what he like how he dissects it. Obviously, I can't watch it all the time because most of the time it's like over an hour long every single time because like a sermon could be 45 minutes, but he always has to like add stuff that he wants to say.
So he like listens to a sermon and dissects it?
Like usually he'll listen to it first, but sometimes he'll just do it like go in raw and just like listen to it as is. And so and he's very cool though. Like I feel like his internet personality versus his YouTube well, they're both on the internet, but like his Instagram personality versus his YouTube personality is like so different. Like,
I follow him on Insta, but it's like I just look at his memes. I don't really get into it.
They're just jokes, but like his videos are very like whoa, not expected, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so then he basically said something that I felt like was kind of true, where he said mega churches will have to dilute their message so that they can cater to the huge population that they have, which is, I guess, is a good or a bad thing. I think that is a bad thing, though. Thoughts?
Thoughts. I think that's probably true in some cases and not true in other cases. So I mentioned before I have a favorite preacher. His name is J.D. Greer. He is the pastor of a mega church. They have like probably about 10,000 people that attend across like 9 campuses, one of which is a prison. So he's got to be doing something right if he's got a church campus in a prison. But I don't know if anyone's who's listening to this has ever listened to one of his sermons, but he does not dilute his messages. In fact, like as someone who's been a Christian for over 30 years and who is a pastor and has been in full-time ministry for a long time, like I still am challenged deeply by his messages. And so I think you can't say that generally, you can't say anything about any population 100%. So that's a generalization. I think it's true in a lot of cases, especially the churches who are like, we want to seek the lost. And so we're just going to like.
And also the ones that count the number of members they have. I feel like that's kind of weird, right?
Well, I mean, it's helpful in some cases, and this is something that I come up against in youth ministry a lot too. Like, there's, it's like, how many people did you have at youth group on Friday? And it's like, okay, it's not about the numbers, but it is about the numbers in the sense that like you have to know how many people you're reaching in order to know like, hey, we want to have 30% of our kids baptized. But if you don't know how many people you have coming to your ministry, you can't measure that, and so there, like, it's helpful to look at numbers. It's not helpful to look at numbers and boast, because there's also like the research about youth ministry says that like a healthy youth ministry is about 10% of the whole number of people that attend your church. Mm-hmm. So if you have 500 people, then 50 people is a good, that's a healthy ministry. If you have fewer than that, then, you got to look at what the dynamics are that are
kids.
Yeah. Well, and you might just be in an area of a city where there's just more older people who have adult kids. Or
yeah, like oh my gosh, I forgot. Why did I just forget what the name was? Dustin's church, they have like a lot of younger adults with smaller children, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, they also have some older. Yeah, they don't have a ton of like youth age people. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can't just be like, oh, you don't have 10%, you're not healthy, fail. But it's also, if I were to say like I have 50 kids in my youth group, that sounds really great. But if there's 10,000 people in my church, that's not a good, so like you can't just take a number and be like no context and know whether it's a good number or a bad number. But it is helpful to look at numbers in the sense of how many people are attending, how many people are getting baptized, how many people are taking steps forward in their faith. that kind of stuff. So
Well,
it's not a black and white thing, right? There's gray.
my question. Oh, I wish I could remember. Like the things that I'm thinking of, I literally can't remember. So there's this YouTuber I watched that I mean, she says she's a Christian, and like I'll believe her, but it's kind of questionable because of other things. But basically, she said she went to this church. She lives in California because she's like a model or something, and she like moved and she was looking for a new church, and she went to this church. But I wish I knew because I remember I searched it up and I was like, oh, but this is a mega church, but like it's not the ones that I mentioned earlier. It's like I want to say that it's a UC, like something U church. I don't really know, but I know that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But the main pastor basically they would like watch videos of him when he's not there, and
Yeah.
when he's there they would be like,
Yeah.
and it was kind of weird because they like loved the pastor so much,
Mhm.
and it was a bit of a weird obsession for like the community where it's like I remember she like showed up a little bit late, right? And there was like an usher showing her place or whatever because there's a lot of people, right? So it's usually useful to have somebody help you go somewhere.
Yeah.
And literally, she was just whispering to her boyfriend or something, and the person in front of her was like, "Shh, he's talking," and it's like, "Whoa," she's just settling in, like, chill out. And apparently, she felt like she was being love bombed, which is a thing that like cults do, where they like make you feel like you're so welcome and you're so included, and it's like a bit much. Well, it's good to feel welcome, but almost as if you're feeling guilty for not wanting to stay, because she
Mhm.
didn't want to continue going because of certain things. And um, I want to say the pastor's name is Franklin, but I think it's just because I think he's old. So, anyway, and there's nothing wrong with it inherently, but the pastor has an Instagram where he like posts pictures with celebrities, and oh, I think he had one with Trump too. And I don't know, like, there's nothing wrong with being friends with famous people, but the way that he was doing it, it seemed a bit weird. Like, oh, they support my church, and it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know who I'm talking about? I feel like I'm not being specific enough.
There are several people that I can think of that fit that description,
Franklin?
so I'm not sure. Well, not Franklin, but I just know, like, I've seen various pastors on Instagram with, like Justin Bieber, and like, I'm Justin Bieber's pastor.
Stephen Furtick, what is it?
Yeah, and then there's anyway. Yeah, there are churches that deify or like celebritize. I'm making up words now.
Mhm.
Their pastors, and I'm gonna be honest. I went to a church. There's a church in Ontario that they have multiple campuses. I guess I would call them a mega church.
Mhm.
And I watched the pastor on the big screen because he was in a different part of the area that I was in, and I still loved that church. But they did it really well, where they really did community well. And that's what I would look at if I was going to a church. Like, are they like deifying this guy or this girl, or are they like coming around the teaching? And I would say that's a question that would be forefront in my mind if I was going to a mega church. But again, one of my favorite pastors
is from
pastor,
a mega
yeah.
church,
And if I was down in North Carolina, I would
Totally
definitely
go.
look at going.
Mhm.
And I would be okay if he was on the big screen. I'd try to figure out which campus he was going to be at and go see him in person because I'm obnoxious and want to be best friends with everyone.
You want to be best friends? You just run up and like, oh, I love you.
Hi, we're going to be best friends. You don't know it yet, but I've done this before and I'll do it again because I'm a stalker a little bit.
Those are like fangirls, though. They're like, oh, I mean, Jaehoon doesn't know that we're married, but we definitely are.
No, it's not like that. But it's
Yeah, I
just
know.
like, I mean, you know the story of my favorite singer who I met once, and I thought he was really cool. I liked his music before, but then he was like actually a very cool person. And I was like, well, now my life mission is to be friends with him, and now we are. So, and it wasn't like I was stalking him. It was just I had a job where I happened to be at a bunch of conferences
And
that
then
he
you
would
saw
play
him.
at, and I would see him, and I would just go talk to him because I like to talk to people, and my life motto is there are no strangers, only friends I haven't met yet. So,
the recent like a Honest Youth Pastor review was, see, can't remember any of the names. It's like I remember the stuff, but it's just like I can think of the face, I can think.
Well,
of
if I look it up, will they tell me?
Oh yeah, Honest Youth Pastor's most recent post, and it was this guy who apparently, according to some magazine, was the fastest growing church in 2020, I think. And yeah, and basically his review was like, okay, this is all good advice, and it's not really a sermon because he brought up like scripture twice. I think like he brought up the same verse twice, and that was like he didn't really explain it. He didn't really do anything about it, and he felt like there wasn't any actual biblical depth. It was just like kind of a good speech. And oh, are you looking at it? I see it in the reflection of your glasses. Hold on, my unedited something something review. That's what it's called. And blah blah blah. Hold on, let's just pause real quick.
I know who Matt Chandler
Stephen
is.
Chandler. He's the head of this church. Do you see it? Anyway, so it's I thought it was very interesting. Like, do you have any thoughts on that whole spiel debacle thing? How do you manage having enough Bible stuff while also giving the right message?
Yeah, well, there's a couple different ways of preparing a sermon. So there's having an idea that you start with, and then you try to make the Bible conform to your idea. And usually, like that, there's a place for that. So let's say we're talking about sex. So there's verses in the Bible that talk about sex. So you look at those verses. Sex is your topic. You bring those verses into that. That's called eisegesis. Jesus, not Jesus.
Oh yeah, he talks about that too.
Yeah. And then exegesis is where you look at a passage of scripture,
context,
and you study that scripture and you ask, what is this saying? And there's no like extraneous ideas you're trying to build in. You're just like, this is saying this thing. And I mean, you can do a little bit of finessing. So, for example, I've preached on one chapter of the Bible twice, Acts 10, and said different things both times. One was about cultural barriers that we need to bust down in order to, acknowledge our brothers and sisters of different cultures. The other one was about how our church needs to be a welcoming place for everyone. And so it's the same passage of scripture, but there's two different ways of applying it. And so in both cases, that's called exegesis, where you take it out of the passage. So I think that you can do sermons to a varying degree. I mean, yeah, like if people are seeing the Bible as like secondary to what they're saying, that's a problem. But if you are like studying the scripture and bringing it in to what you're saying and being faithful to what the text says, you can't just be like, well, this verse says this one thing. That's called proof texting. And if you do that, you just take a verse completely out of the context of the rest of the chapter and the rest of the book, and even like thinking about who it's written to and what's happening at the time. So you get into a lot of problems, and that's where a lot of like arguments come from. But like I had a friend who told a story once where he was hitchhiking. I do not recommend this. Don't try this at home. This is a long time ago.
Not safe for kids.
Yeah. He was hitchhiking and he got picked up by a guy, and he was like, I'm going to tell you about Jesus while we're in the car. Oof. And the guy was like, well, I don't believe in God. And he said, well, the Bible says there is no God. And he was like,
what?
And then he turned to a verse in Psalms that says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God, So like, but that's like a really dumb example of what proof texting can be. Like you can take one line of a verse and say, there's no God.
Fool says that there is no
God. I know, but
so
like, even
is he calling himself a fool?
Yeah, well, he was calling that guy a fool, and he got kicked out of the car. I don't recommend that method of evangelism either, but that's just a story to explain that, like, you can make the Bible say anything you want to if you're willing to cut and paste,
What is that called again? There's a name for when you, like, plagiarize, but when you're only, like, plagiarizing certain parts, or you, like, put it together when it's not actually what they're saying. I feel like there's a word, but yeah, because we had to do that for English, and she was like, definitely don't do that, guys, because she was like, you have to say it in your own words, and that's still plagiarism. And yeah, there's so much plagiarism talk in our classes, even though like we never plagiarize, like it never happens, I swear.
Well, it happened to me once.
Whoa,
in a group project, rough. But we don't need to go into that story.
There's just anger.
No, it's just a long story, but someone else there was a group project and someone else plagiarized their section of the paper that we were gonna fail it. Cool. They said if you get caught plagiarizing, you automatically fail the class, and it's a stage up class. It was only offered every 2 years, so we were not going to graduate. So like anyway, tough. We don't have to go into that, but it was rough. Plagiarism is bad.
Yes, do not do it.
Wisdom with Cheryl.
What? It's like Captain Obvious. Like, do not plagiarize. Oh, you know what happened? Okay, so recently, apparently, I thought that you had seen on my channel that I have uploaded more podcasts, but Cheryl told me that she didn't know, and so I like kind of
Sorry,
I
I'm out of the
posted
loop.
I posted like a special jam sesh with me or something
Ooh.
where I was just like strumming, I was singing, and basically what happened was I got copyright claimed or striked twice in the
Ooh.
same video because I was playing multiple songs, right? By Rent Collective's what's it called? Something music? No. What is it called when you're like signed? Oh, label, music label,
Okay.
and
Wow.
by Cityalite. So I was like, hold on here. This is fair use. I transformed it. I changed it. I didn't use any of the original audio. So like, tell me what's going on. And also, this is like these are Christian bands. I thought the point of making worship music was that like other people could hear it, not just people in the church, but also like people who are just like, oh, that's cool, you know?
Yeah.
So what's the point of like copyright claiming?
I mean, I don't know. I don't pretend to know copyright laws. Ryan could. You could ask him that question. He could explain that more. But
by the way, I kind of know. Usually, they follow the U.S.'s copyright because like YouTube is made in the U.S. and like there's such a huge audience in the U.S. And so basically, even if you're like filming or doing something from outside of North America, just in general, but like you still kind of have to follow the FTC laws and all that stuff. And I don't know everything about it, but it's just like I know that for stuff that is copywritten, you have to transform or the other thing. Basically, if you use the same clip, then you have to like commentate on it, or you can edit it with like zooms or like special audio or whatever, and that's fair use. Except people still copyright strike unfairly.
Yeah, I mean, even like when we are doing like live streaming our church service, we have to put up the credits of the music and our licensing number, where we pay for a license to be able to sing those songs and play those songs in public and project the words. And so we have to like post that before every song that we sing, so that so if you notice there's like a bunch of numbers that come up on the screen or whatever, that's because we have to do that or we get copyright strikes. So
and also if you get 3 strikes, your channel can get banned. So
no more jamming with Hannah.
No more songs, no more music. Except like it's so weird because I know that even like pop labels are way more strict about it. Like even if you just sing one line, say I don't know, just give me like a random song, oof. Say you sing like oof, and literally there are some labels that will just strike the whole video. Even that if that was like 5 seconds of the video, they will take. Well, if you're a YouTuber, they'll take the whole revenue of the video too. And even if you try to dispute it, because you're allowed to dispute it on YouTube, it just goes back to the person who sent the strike. So you think they're going to change their mind?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't really think that they're going to change their mind. Unless it was like, oops, I just went to this thing and then clicked this other
Well, Hannah, just tell me who it is and I'll just go be friends with them. And then I'll be like, so my girl Hannah tried to sing your song. Can you take it away?
Yeah, so pretty fun stuff. I mean, this isn't really related to what I wanted to say, but it's always fun to like be a little more lighthearted.
Rude. That's all I have to say.
Oh wait, no, I don't have Wi-Fi. Maybe for part 2, if there's a part 2, I'll show you this. There's like, you know what? I talked about it in another episode, but I thought that it would be interesting to bring it up with you because you probably know better than me. But I thought this was kind of in the woo-woo sphere because some Christian friends, liked this post, and I was like, oh, okay. It was a TikTok, but it was posted on Reels. So Reels is on Instagram, guys. I mean, you probably know already, but
I even know that. So hopefully you know that.
Sorry, Lexi.
Oh yeah, hi Lexi.
And so, oh no, I probably have to mute. Oh, I'm gonna write that down. Block out Lexi because she went on my podcast and now she goes by Luca because she didn't want her identity to be. She didn't want to be.
Goes by what?
Luca. Because
hi Luca.
That was like her almost name.
Yeah.
So let's just Luca. Let's just change it to Luca, or I'll just put censored. Censored.
By beep.
And so, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So basically, there's this video that I came across on Instagram. That's a TikTok, but it became a Reels, and it was like all that I have, I already need. All that I need, I already have. I think, and it was like all that I desire, I will receive because my reality is created by me. And
fun.
The first 2, I was like, oh, okay, you mean like you're enough in God, like God gives you everything you need, you know? Yep. But then I was like, all I desire I will receive because my reality is created by me. I was like, oh, that's the woo stuff right there. That's some
Yeah.
woo.
Yeah, that's manifestation, right? People are
Yeah,
talking about
law
that.
of manifestation.
Yeah. I don't believe in it. Because if I did, if it was true, there would be a lot more stuff in my life than. But that's and I don't say that in a bad thing, but like my story of Japan and like being like wanting to stay in Japan and like if I had stayed in Japan, and I spoke that many times in my life, not as like I'm manifesting this, but like I prayed that even to God, and if that had come to pass, I would have missed out on
so
a
many
lot.
things would have been different.
I would have missed out on. I mean, I'm sure it still would have been awesome. Living in Japan is pretty fun,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I would have missed out on a lot in my life that I've done since. So I think as a Christian, it comes down to like, if you believe that God is sovereign, which means that He is in control and He has your life laid out for you, then that doesn't really jive with the manifestation thing, right? Like if you are just like, I want to say this and it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not really believing that God has your life laid out for you and that He is He's in control of it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and not in control in a bad way, but like God is just like, He knows more than you do. He has more information and He's going to make it happen, right? So that those two things do not line up. So that's one thing. And I think just like, I don't know, the manifestation thing is really strange in the sense of like when you're in a certain moment and you want something and you're speaking something into existence, or you're trying to speak something into existence, like you don't know if you want that in like 10 hours, let alone 10
It's like
years,
the whole
like
genie thing.
yeah, it's just kind of like I want this now. And then like sometimes I've asked God for stuff and it hasn't happened, like the Japan thing. And then it, like I'm thankful that it didn't happen the way that I wanted it to, and so like that's years later, but
because you didn't know.
yeah. So there is something to be said. I do positive affirmations in my life. I have things that I say about myself, about God, about my world that just help me like to internalize it and remind myself of like my purpose in life. And so like for example, one of them is like, I'm a pastor of teenagers, and it helps me just focus in on what I'm supposed to be right
when you're
now in
writing
this
a text,
moment.
who is your public? Who are you targeting?
Yeah, but like it's more than that. I don't just say I'm a pastor of teenagers, check. But it's like I'm a pastor of teenagers. I'm called to help them find their identity. Like so it just helps me to remind myself of my calling and what my goals are, and within my own life, like personal life, ministry or job, and the rest of the world. So
well, for me, I'm going. It's not that I disagree with you, but I think that there is something to say about like, oh, it's law of attraction. I think that's what they call it. And basically, I think that why people believe in it is that there's so many. It's not. There's also the fact that there's like a placebo effect that if you're like, oh, if you learn a new word, your brain automatically registers it much more, and you're like, oh wait, I just learned that, but in reality, you probably have heard it at the same rate. You just didn't like register it.
yeah,
So you say, oh wait, I just said that thing and it happened.
yeah,
It could be part of that, but it could also be that I think if it happens, right, where is this coming from? Like who? That's why I don't really believe in ghosts because like it's yes they could be spirits, but are they necessarily benevolent? I don't really believe that every single thing in the world is like good for you and is helping you, right?
yeah,
And so there could be things that happen in your life, but that doesn't mean that they're good.
yeah.
Like you don't know what the outcome will be from
Totally.
that thing. And you could be calling out to like I remember there was this girl who used to be into like speaking to spirits and stuff, and she's still somewhat cognizant of the presence of them, but she realized that they were not benevolent. They weren't like helping her because she would like somehow she would feel fear, but they kind of convinced her to still talk to her or something. And there was a lot of things that like they told her would happen and they did happen, but is it because that they knew it was going to happen or that they made it happen?
Yeah.
So there's that
Yeah.
whole thing. And so I do believe that words have power because like what are you trying to attract when you're saying these things, right? You don't know what might happen. Oh, what was I trying to say? Oh, but then the all that I desire I will receive. I was like, well, maybe they still are kind of coming from a Christian perspective because I remember there's a verse where it's like, if your desires are aligned with God, then you will get everything you want.
Yeah,
or something
it's
like that.
Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Again, it's not necessarily like, okay, I'll delight myself in the Lord 100%, and then I get everything I want, right? Like, and people interpret that verse that way. But there's a lot of verses in the Bible that are misused, and I think that's one of them, because what happens is when we start to focus on God more and more, then He changes our desires. So it's not like, I want to be filthy rich.
And
So
then
I'm
He's
gonna
like, cool, gotcha,
yeah, and so
fam.
God's like, okay, I'm waiting for you to get to like this level, and it's like the little, the fundraiser thermometer, and He's coloring it.
He's like, she's almost there.
And then when you hit the top, He's like dumping gold into your life, but yeah, like God gives us the desires of our heart, in the sense of like He changes what we want. Our desires align with His desires, and then and He's a good God, and so that's not a bad thing. And then we get to do awesome stuff in our lives, and we get to be a part of awesome stuff that He's doing. So
hold on, I'm gonna pause 1 second. I totally forgot to read this out.
Hey guys, so that's the end of part 1, because turns out we talked about like stuff that, well, we talked about everything I wanted to talk about, but it took much longer than expected. So expect part 2 coming soon. Sorry for the terrible audio. The mic is not connecting to my computer, so this is the vibes right now.